We'll call the October 17th, 2024 meeting of the Economic Development Authority to order. I'll be looking for an approval for the agenda for today.
I'll make a motion we approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? All right, and approval from last month, September 19th minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve them.
I think I'm the secretary, can I second?
Sure.
I'll second then.
All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? All right, well, we need to get an update from the St. Cloud City Economic Development.
Hi, good
Hey,
morning.
Good morning.
My name is Lindsay Stram. I'm with City of St. Cloud Economic Development. I apologize if you're getting the B team today. Kathy was unable to make it, so you're getting my 2.5 years of experience versus her 13 in the city plus more elsewhere. So I do apologize, but we'll get through it today.
Just tell Chrissy when you want
Okay,
to
yeah, we'll go to the next one. So oh, awesome, thank you. So one of the big things that we have done in the last year is we updated our strategic plan. Of course, everybody's favorite part is, several meetings of our EDA board were taken up with our strategic plan this year. Our mission continues to be that we invest the city's resources to lead and strengthen St. Cloud as the economic heart of the central Minnesota region. And these are the 4 strategic plan or key strategies that we came away from the strategic plan with. So number 1, act as a coordinator, facilitator, and connector between the city and its partners. Advance business expansion, retention, and attraction. Lead and facilitate downtown revitalization and pilot initiatives focused on the workforce growth in St. Cloud. So all those, nothing too groundbreaking. We can go ahead next. So first, just a slide of the partners. You know, we attend meetings and events provided by our partners. I know I did come to some of the Sherburne County housing session last year. It's a lot of what we do is show up and make sure that we know what's going on in area, places, and with our partners. So that one's pretty self-explanatory, but we can go ahead next. This is our development activity dashboard. So there is a QR code on the slides, and I brought a year-to-date report. These are any projects over $250,000 in value within city limits. So there aren't any notable projects within the Sherburne County corner of St. Cloud for this year. There is one that was announced, speaking of housing. It was just approved by Planning Commission and City Council, 115 unit housing development. It's a mix of apartments, single family homes. So that is going to be, right in that small corner of St. Cloud that's in Sherburne County near the, there's a lot of other housing in that area. I'm not describing that very well, but it's going to be, apartments, single family units. So that's a big Sherburne County development that obviously a permit hasn't been pulled for yet, but year to date we're at a higher total value of projects than we were at the entire end of year 2023. So that is good. It has been a slow couple of years, and I think everybody's in a bit of a holding period right now, waiting for a number of things to happen. But I do have a couple of copies of that year-to-date report. If anybody's interested, I can leave those behind. Go next. The downtown revitalization is a big goal for City of St. Cloud and a lot of other cities coming out of COVID. A lot of things have changed for our downtown areas. This is a list of new businesses and expansions, remodels in the last about 18 months. So there have been a significant number of new investments and new businesses started downtown. One of those, pictures, the Great River Children's Museum is hoping to open beginning of next year, which is obviously a big project for downtown St. Cloud and also the area. It's going to be the 2nd largest children's museum in the state of Minnesota. So that is a significant development really for the whole area, I think. Other things, yeah, restaurants, lots of fun things, but that is the biggest one. Another part of downtown revitalization is the city is currently marketing 2 of our surface parking lots downtown for redevelopment. So, yeah, I have information on those on our website and things, but yeah, we're getting rid of some of that surface parking. I know that has been a lot of the mayor has engaged urbanists and people to come advise what we should be doing for downtown St. Cloud, and that's something that Fargo did, was get rid of a lot of that surface level parking and have those lots be developed and focus on the parking ramps for city parking. So something that people are wary of in St. Cloud. People don't love parking ramps in St. Cloud for some reason, but I do think overall that is something that people have agreed that is a good thing, to get rid of a lot of that surface parking. So we can go next slide, please.
Quick, where's the Foley Mansion?
The Foley Mansion is near St. Cloud State. It is, yeah, it was an old house.
355 Third Avenue South.
Thank you, okay. Yeah.
Beautiful. Alan and Carmen are.
I have only seen pictures. It's really, really cool.
I
what
know,
they've
I
done
just-
there.
I hadn't heard it called that, so
Yeah.
I saw it billing probably.
Yeah, it's an event space now, weddings, meetings, things like that, so very cool. So pilot initiatives focus on workforce growth. One of the biggest things that has happened in recent years is the Advanced Manufacturing Lab in St. Cloud Technical and Community College. And this really came out of when Electrolux closed in 2018, or they announced in 2018, closed in 2019. There was some funding that came out of the federal EDA for a target industry analysis. So what came out of that was defining the 4 target industries for the city of St. Cloud, which one of those being precision manufacturing, another being automation. So this really is an initiative that came out of this study. St. Cloud Technical and Community College was given a $2.5 million grant from the federal EDA to create this advanced manufacturing lab. And this is really cool. There was a ribbon cutting last year, but really over the whole year, they have filled this space with this equipment. Getting to train students in the newer automation and manufacturing techniques. I think the only metal 3D printer in the state of Minnesota is in this advanced manufacturing lab. So just a really cool initiative that came out of a really scary announcement being Electrolux closing. Another thing that has come, I know Brian and I attended a meeting last couple weeks about VEX robotics. So this lab also being used to bring robotics programming to middle schoolers and high schoolers in the area. So a lot of very cool things focused on the future workforce.
This is an example when we talk about the federal EDA that we're trying to get more funds from there. This is an example of what it can bring. I mean, this is a huge project for the region and it came from that.
And over 5 years, it was slow, but I mean, the study and now kind of the culmination of all of this work, that there are 82 students there this year enrolled in these programs that use this area. So very cool. We can go to the next slide. These are our 2 city-owned business parks. We have one right off of I-94 and another over near the St. Cloud Airport. These are really, the I-94, we have a few lots left, but is largely filled out. The St. Cloud Regional Business Park went through a rebrand this year. It was called the St. Cloud Airport Business Park, and we had some input from partners and people who were involved in those sessions that it's near the airport, but it's not right next to the airport, and that name was confusing. So went through a little rebrand, and hoping that is something that we are focused on in the coming year, is really trying to fill out this business park and focusing on our key industries and really trying to make this a manufacturing hub on the east side of St. Cloud. We can go to the next slide. And to that end, we have a new business. There was just a land sale in this park. The Beaver Island brewing company had a building in that business park that they vacated a year or so ago. So just recently, that building sold and a plot of land next to it to St. Cloud Industrial Products or Sunburst Memorials. So they're going to be doing granite cutting and things over in that park. They have been a St. Cloud business for 100+ years. So very exciting that they are choosing St. Cloud to stay and expand and be a part of that new business park.
What was their previous location?
Near 25th Avenue, like on the railroad tracks right there. Yeah, better. And I think, next slide, I think that was all I had for today. Yeah, so I'll leave a few things behind. I have that development activity dashboard if anyone's interested. And there's our contact information. I am happy to take questions and hope to attend more in the future, so thank you.
Well, thank you, very good presentation. Any questions?
Just one comment. Between the St. Cloud robotics lab and Staples, a little bit farther north, one unique thing that we have is access to robot techs coming straight out of school. So it's a advantage that Sherburne County has. If we can attract automation companies, they've got a ready-made source of employees within easy driving distance. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Okay, anything else?
Yes.
Well, thank you, thanks for making the trip.
I have to
down.
sneak out, so I apologize, but you have my information, so thank you.
All right, number 5, Sherburne County Housing Study Staff Review Level.
Yeah, so this is the, some highlights of what came out of the housing study. And myself and Dan will kind of bounce around these different sides, but really, there we go. They broke it down into these categories, so we tried to follow their categories on the study, going from demographics all the way down to conclusions and recommendations based on what they found. So just diving straight into it. Oh. We start off with some key points. So this housing study was through the year 2030, no further. It identifies the demand for 5,200 new housing units in our county through 2030. Of that, they specified age-restricted senior housing to be 2,205 units, and then all other housing close to 3,000. So you'll see that senior housing pops up time and time again as being a need as the baby boomers continue to age up and need different homes for that. The growth in the county is projected at around 10%, and another key point was that 62% of our county workforce commutes out of the county, and we have a nice slide for that too. But continuing, again, that baby boomer generation aging up, so by 2030, the age 65 to 74 will grow by 14%, and 75 to 84 will grow by 34%. And you can kind of see that track along. For rentals, our overall rental vacancy is at 3.1%, which is below market equilibrium, which we'll kind of describe. Our median rent in the county is $1,035. Our resale price, as we all kind of know, has been jumping up, and in 2022 it was $370K for our median resale price. And a really important part too is that our current lot supply is less than 2 years, which is something we'll dig into more, but the recommendation is 3 to 5 years being plotted and ready to go, so platted. So at this point we're less than 2 years supply, but we'll kind of dive into each one of these a little bit more. So the way that they broke it up was into sub-markets. You can kind of see, so the sub-markets generally make sense. The one that I had to keep looking back at was the northeast submarket, so that's Princeton, southern part, Baldwin Township, Blue Hill, and Santiago. So again, when we look at these submarkets, that's how they broke it out. So again, our population growth, we're tracking at about 10% from 2020 to 2030. We had that huge expansion from the 2000s, 2010, and then it slowed down to about that 10% range from 2010 to 2020. So we are on track to continue at about 10%, which is what we did from 2010 to 2020.
Remember this chart when we talk about aging population? We had a lot of people move here in the 80s and 90s, and now they're going into that senior age level, so that's where a lot of that comes in.
So they had a lot of excellent graphs like this. So breaking it into the submarkets, our population changed. So the percent of people coming into the different submarkets here. You see that Zimmerman is projected to grow by 16.3% by 2030. And you see that the least is up in that northwest corner, kind of that St. Cloud, Haven Township area. It's the least. So this is a great graph showing that the baby boomer generation aging up, and that means that you get a lot more negatives as far as the age groups of the lower, so 55 to 64 through, I mean, pretty much all the way through except for the weird kind of jump at 25 to 34. But generally, a big percentage of our population is aging up, and that's going to be impacting our housing needs.
And to that point, I speak to a lot of the seniors that are aging and wanting to like get out of their houses and downsize, and they express great frustration of not being able to find something where they have been residing for years. So then you lose them to other communities.
That's exactly right. And on that note, I know like in St. Cloud, Torberg Builders is a big developer for patio homes. And I know they have almost like a year wait list. If anyone even hears of a patio home, they try and contact Torberg before it's even built. So there is definitely that need to move that into the regions that people are already living here in our county.
I think Olin Place has a 60-person wait list right now.
Wow.
Huge market
How does
loss.
that do for inventory then, if baby boomers are going to their senior living and then
Well, that
there's
opens up what
availability
they're,
for
yeah.
more?
So that creates cycle of life housing.
Yeah. Right now, the baby boomers are kind of stuck in 4 or 5 bedroom homes that they're not really utilizing to their max. Yeah. It then kind of transitions into employment trends. So great part about the study is it touched on a few different aspects, not just housing, but our employee change by sector, obviously seeing that huge growth in construction and manufacturing, which tracks with the rest of the data that we know for our area. And you did see leisure and hospitality jump up too. So people coming into this county for leisure and hospitality. Again, this is another kind of nice graph to show. The numbers are slightly different than what I said on the first slide, but we have at least 41,000 leaving out of the county. I think that first slide said closer to 60,000 out of the county for work each day and then coming back in. We have about 15,000 folks coming from other counties into our county to work, and about 10,000 working within the county throughout the county. So we have a huge in-out every single day, which is really fascinating to me.
One question on that.
Yeah.
So on the out of county, does that include telework where they work here, but their
It's a
office
business
is someplace
address.
else?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we know how that breaks down at all?
Not to that level, but it definitely, if they work here 4 days, go to the cities for 1, the cities is where it shows them working.
What if they're full-time remote?
It shows in the cities,
Okay.
wherever the business address is.
Okay.
It'd be a good one to drill down on, yeah. So, for our actual housing stock, so when our houses were built in Sherburne County, nearly 60% of our houses, both single-family and the big multiplexes and multifamily, 60% were built after 1990. So, this is important because 60% of our houses are newer. I mean, 1990, you're starting to get, a little bit older there. But as compared to, I know, St. Cloud, a lot of their houses were built more 1940s through 1970s. So our housing stock is relatively newer compared to some other counties. However, you see that big boom in the 2000s of, from 2000s to 2010, 28% of our current housing stock was built during that time. So it is starting to age up, it's starting to get to be older housing. So percentage of listings, this breaks down between our single-family homes and our multifamily homes. And the way that the report breaks down the multifamily homes is basically anything that's not a single-family detached structure all by itself. So when you think of multifamily homes, that's including townhomes, I think twin homes, apartments, all that. So you can kind of see here our current listings. Again, a majority of this is going to be those single-family homes. Wow, that's jumping all over. Oh. Beautiful. So another one, some of these, we went through a few times and tried to kill off some charts that are a little bit more confusing. But this one's nice because it shows the average value of owner-occupied homes in each sub-market. So you can see like the above 500K market there. Clear Lake has the most percentage there, whereas everyone is kind of averaging out mostly around that 300K to 400K mark. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else to that, Dan.
Just Clear Lake has a lot of lakeshore properties, that's what's driving that up. And then the under 50 would be your mobile homes probably.
Is there a companion graph to that that shows absolute numbers as opposed to percentage?
I don't believe they had one. It would be, I'm sure that we could get one.
The only reason I say that is Clear Lake, for example, I don't know what the number is.
Oh.
Compared to, if it's a small number of homes,
Yeah.
but a lot of those are, high end. That's one thing versus a large number of homes and they're also high end.
Yeah, very good point. So this breaks down our percentages between those that own their homes and those that are renters. So you'll see that in that northwest corner, that's our highest population of renters at 44%. A lot of that, when you actually look at the numbers, is in that southeast part of St. Cloud, huge rental population there. The next highest one is in Elk River, and our least amount of renters would be up in that northeast submarket, so 94% of individuals own their home there.
Is there a way to break that northeast corner out to define what ones are related to college rental housing?
The northwest one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was.
For the northeast or northwest?
Northwest.
That's a good point, there are a lot of St. Cloud State.
Yeah. That would be worth looking into.
And just curious, these numbers, would they include, because there's, in Elk River, for example, there's several apartment buildings that are just finishing construction. Would those be included in this or not? Okay, so those would be in addition to.
This is existing.
Okay.
But Elk River's also got a lot of new homes coming, so those might not.
Yeah, that's true too.
This is for rental housing, so the amount of rental housing that was built per year. You can see that we had a big bump in 2020, through currently, where there's, in general, more rental housing being built throughout the county, because there's kind of a need for that, but other slides kind of touch on this a little bit better.
Vacancy rates were around 1% a couple years ago, which shows there's a big demand for multifamily. If you drive around our county right now, every single city's had at least one new apartment built, and that was based on the demand. It'll be interesting to see if that continues as we go forward.
So here's our so the amount, the actual number side of it. I'm blanking on what this one is. General housing.
I have just a general observation. So the northeast corridor, is that sector that they're talking about. It captures, you know, city of Princeton, it captures Baldwin Township that has a lot of development, but then it also grabs Blue Hills, San Diego Township, which actually has nothing. Yeah, the soils are really poor up there, they don't have development, they're agriculturally zoned. So it seems like
Federally owned land, yeah.
federally owned land too, so it seems like the grabbing a big chunk of area that has really contrasting land uses is just one observation. That would kind of make these numbers a little bit interesting. Because even in the northwest corner, they're grabbing Briggs Lake Chain, which has a lot of higher density housing. There are subdivisions over there. But that northeast corridor, I've looked at the study a few times and I keep kind of scratching my head. I feel like we're missing something there.
Good point too.
A further, kind of a better divide, because it really is kind of a tale of two, you know, land uses and land use patterns.
But we did the study in 2020. These were the districts they recommend we break them in, and we never had that discussion again. We just kept it the same as it was, but maybe if we had.
As I look at the study, I keep kind of,
Because
it makes my,
But that's this county, it's so diverse with everywhere you go, it's so
The good
different.
part is, the full report, the full 200 pages or so, most of these, they break down the actual numbers then, and a lot of them, they break it down by city and by township. So that would probably then fall on us to kind of start breaking that down further, and then show another map that says, within this submarket, here's what Santiago looks like, here's what Baldwin looks like. And I think that would be worth it too, to your point.
that's kind of how, that's just one observation that,
Yeah.
And this slide is just the number of rental units. We had the percentage on the previous slide. This is just the actual number of
Break down market rate versus section 8?
they do in the study. Yep.
So, geez, this is very touchy, I'm sorry. So now we move on to senior housing. And senior housing is interesting because they break it down into a full spectrum of different types of senior housing. There's a really good breakdown where they actually kind of show this as a tree. But you go from fully independent, single-family home, you know, think of a patio home, think of something that's nice and accessible, but the individual lives there by themselves, full independence, all the way through the other end of the spectrum, which is that skilled nursing home, which is highly dependent. You know, you have resources there. Usually that's more of a center that's, well, not necessarily, but so you've got that whole spectrum that fits under the senior housing umbrella. And the study does a good job at breaking down how much of each of these is projected needed through 2030. So currently, this is our senior housing units, which tracks very similar to some of the other graphs as far as number of units in each region here, each submarket. Now here's where they start breaking it down. By 2030, this is the demand that they expect. The red is for active adult, and the blue is for service enhanced. So that service enhanced is that cutoff where you start having services in the home. Majority of the need is still going to be that active adult. But it is worth thinking about. They're going to continue to age up. So while by 2030 the need is active adult, by 2040, 2050, that's going to start switching back over to that service enhanced. So, but currently the demand is more for active adult.
So this obviously, this isn't obviously taking into account Seago when they're doing senior housing, like Guardian Angels, because obviously that's, they're trying to get the Elk River population too.
We don't want to, that's right, County.
Yeah. Well, when I look at the Elk
They
River
don't
numbers,
exist.
yeah, across the river.
Yeah, that river is that, yeah, exactly. No, but that's a good point though. It'd be nice to compare this to other regional studies that are happening.
One question too, in regards to the active senior, was there any look to, we do have some kind of unique, like in Becker Township, Carefree Country Club, which is a snowbird haven that is very active, that property out there. And we also have Travelers on the Mississippi, some of those other things that has like, Carefree has 400 units out there. And, you know, they are park model style, but very active. There's planned events. And some of the prices out there, if you wanna get into Carefree, you're gonna be looking at spending $250-some thousand for a park model at $2,000 a year for the maintenance costs. So those are some, I mean, that's a huge market. Granted, they leave in the wintertime, but they have a huge influx of cash that they put into.
And that was not factored.
And I think I was at that,
We
for.
went to the chamber event out there, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that they were saying they're pretty full up, and usually stay pretty full
Oh,
too.
yeah, very little turnover. It's not what it started out to be.
No.
At all.
Statistic.
Everybody says, keep flying under the radar, we're not paying property taxes like, the value of the home is.
It's an interesting place. So then they break it down into special needs housing, and I really appreciate that they actually break down what they mean by special needs, because it's different than what you hear otherwise. But special needs, they break it down into all of these categories. So that includes veterans, that includes homelessness, below the poverty line, housing services for disabled, and so it's kind of this big umbrella that covers these disparate groups. And this was just a slide that they included as far as what our licensing is in the county. So we've got 44 adult foster care licensed facilities, 40, and then kind of breaks it down there. So a total of 85 licensed special needs housing currently. And going into poverty rates, it's interesting because our overall poverty rate, I believe, is at 4% for the county. But within that 4%, this is the breakdown. So, oh no, I apologize. That kind of all told brings together. But the point of this graph is that it's actually our 65 years or older that are falling below that poverty line. Not so much some of the other groups, yes, but really that 65 and older are struggling more so than other groups on that poverty line. And folks at this table might be able to speak to that better, but I imagine that's because, you know, there's more on the fixed income that isn't keeping up with inflation, kind of thing. Okay, so going into the next category, this is planned and pending housing development. So looking at currently, these are the total number of planned, pending, or under construction. So kind of to your point for under construction. Elk River has a whole bunch that are planned and approved, so you see that development in Elk River. You have a fair bit in Zimmerman that are currently under construction, a fair bit in Big Lake under construction. Right now, nothing in Clear Lake, Northeast, or Northwest areas.
We don't have St. Cloud on here, we probably should have, as you just heard, they have 116 units.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna be an important node.
And do we have a way to, is some of that based because maybe there isn't enough available lots to be developed? Is there something that's coming up that'll tell us how that's affecting that opportunity?
I'm not sure if they link the two nicely, and I think that would be, but
They do say our lots are, we're supposed to have
Yeah.
a 5-year inventory, and we have a 2-year inventories. And that's probably generous at the 2%.
I think the northeast though, there's at least 1 or 2 developments that are going on up there right now. One off of County Road 9 and then.
How many units do you know?
I think that's about 20. And then we have one that's a 10 unit one coming up.
this slide might be a nice one to ask them how the data was gathered and when they stopped collecting data. I imagine they stopped collecting data a good little while ago. Q2, 2024. So by target market, throughout all of Sherburne County, so we have a whole bunch of single-family homes that are planned and approved, which is good. Based on the study, that's what we need more of. We have a decent amount of age-restricted rentals, and then, so that kind of breaks down there, and some market rate rentals and multifamily for sale. So then the next category is housing affordability. So these are the current single-family resale values. in our different submarkets. You'll see that the highest is in that northeast at 422K, and the lowest would be that northwest submarket at 2,073K. And the average for Sherburne County as a whole is 375K is our average resale single-family home values.
And those submarkets include all of the townships along with the cities, correct?
Which again, to your point, would be nice to kind of break that out even further. And I think it does in the actual report, but they don't have the graph for breaking it out in the submarkets. So the costs for existing versus new in Sherburne County per square foot. So you can see that obviously the new construction costs more and sold at a higher price than our existing stock.
Is that one track, Todd, at 245?
As far as
When you build, that's per square foot, does that sound?
that, I don't know, that would probably be more of a Ken question, I think.
I don't know, we don't do anything by square foot, so.
Do we know if it's typical for existing homes to have a significant delta between below new construction?
If you look at 2015, it was about 40%, and it's down to 30% as the market has kind of contracted in supply. So we're seeing that difference shrink as there's less and less homes available.
Yeah, I guess my question is that typical nationwide, or, I'm trying to just put it in context.
Yeah. This slide would be nice to compare to at least Minnesota on a whole nationwide.
Yeah.
Taking notes here for back to that.
I'm just curious, how do they get to that square foot? Do they go by I mean, I was just asking Ken, and he's saying they don't use that as a metric. Why do they use that is that our study people doing that?
Yeah, and that's pretty common, and a lot of your nationals, your bigger regional builders, can be very, very accurate as far as square foot costs, because they're building the same product over and over and over. If you were to ask me, we've never built the same home twice, so trying to put we build some projects with, smaller, because we deal with the seniors, so a lot of times we're dealing with smaller square footages because they're downsizing, but the finishes are very high end, which skews those square foot numbers up quite a bit. There's other times we're building a sizable two-story with basic finishes, and the square foot costs are very low. So my company doesn't track square footage costs, but they get these from the national builders, and they're pretty accurate for a production built home.
And real estate insurance uses
That's per square foot number. So housing demand, this is interesting. We left it in because we wanted to show what they expect each age group to want. And again, this is just an average. There's obviously outliers, but again, showing that 55 and above, so even dropping the age all the way down to 55 and above, would like to start transitioning into that senior housing once they become kind of that empty nester and they want to start downsizing. So kind of showing that need again, that the smaller homes, the age-in-place homes, the senior housing is really a huge need. So this is the for sale housing demand projected. So again, that's projecting out the demand type between single family homes and multifamily. So there's a huge demand in Elk River, Big Lake, Becker, Zimmerman, kind of smaller going northeast. I think to the commissioner's point, this would be an interesting graph to kind of break down by percentage, because obviously it's going to be the highest in Elk River as far as population, but how does that kind of break down relative to their population? Anything else on this one, Dan? Okay. This is a really important breakdown, and eventually I'm going to cut that so that you put on two different slides. But overall, this is the demand going into 2030. So We have that overall number of 5,200. 3,045 of that is for general occupancy. Out of that general occupancy, 2,119 of that is for your homeowners, so breaking down between single family and multifamily, and a little less than 1,000 for rental. So there's still a need for rental housing, and there's a need for single family and multifamily. So there's a need basically for everything. But you can see that the senior housing is a big chunk of that 5,200 at 2,205. And that senior housing is further broken out into what is actually needed. You can see that the need for subsidized housing, because that poverty level is a little bit higher amongst our population that's 65 and older, is a decent need. And then you have the affordable housing, which is just kind of that regular market rate. And a huge need for rentals with folks that are our aging population. So breaks it out nicely there. And again, that service enhanced, needing more of those too. So, getting into our recommendations. They do mention a few times throughout the report that our platted lots are only at a 2-year supply throughout the county. Again, that would be an interesting one to maybe break down by the submarkets and then even further from there. But we're only at a 2-year supply generously, and the recommendation is 3 to 5 years. So if we don't get to platting new lots decently, then after that 2-year mark, we kind of run out of platted lots, is what that number is saying. They recommend, and we support the recommendation, that might require more private-public partnerships and other incentives to stimulate lower-priced new home construction. So when we're looking into the future at the Housing Trust Fund, maybe using some of that for some of that partnership, and different initiatives there. The growing need for patio homes, one-level homes, aging-in-place kind of homes that are for our active senior population, and strong need for also the affordable subsidized rental housing, both on the single-family side and multifamily side. So, main takeaway here is that our senior population is continuing to age up, and we're hoping that the housing can meet that need, as well as getting new lots platted to get closer to that 3 to 5 year mark. I think that might be our last slide, so any questions on that?
I think it'd be nice to understand, delving into what is it that our community partners would possibly need to help facilitate what this is. We've had many conversations about what the cost is to develop these lots, and a lot of it is the infrastructure needs that need to get to them. And to have that bear totally on a developer or one of our communities, I think we need to be a partner in that as well. That's just my personal opinion.
I think it'd be, one thing I'm just thinking through on this is how we turn this into something that's actionable.
That's what this slide is.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing I was thinking though is we might want to take the chart by the subregions and plot on there the predicted demand versus the predicted stock, or so that they're compatible numbers. I don't know if the demand is demand on top of what we have today. So the existing stock probably wouldn't be effective.
Is there a slide?
But do it for each of the housing types, yeah, something like this. But I don't know, it says higher and lower. I'm kind of wondering about absolute numbers. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to think of a way to show, okay, this is what we project. It's going to be the additional construction. This is what the demand is, so that we can prioritize by area what needs to go where. Because it may be different for senior housing versus workforce housing versus, the different types. And so it might actually be, even within Sherburne County, different sub-region solutions. I just think it might be an interesting way to look at it, to see if we can come up with some specific actions around it.
And to your point, Andrew, if we do build or get a certain, like senior ability, that will then probably free up those homes that they're currently in. And then that will help with that resale move up.
I think to some extent that's true. I want to be a little careful on that though, because how quickly does that trickle down happen? Because if you've got seniors in high-end homes, they want to downsize, they want to move into the, senior housing.
Senior housing.
You open up the high-end homes. And how does that compare to the demographic trends that we saw in the first couple of slides? And then, so people move up to those, and then allegedly that opens up the next level down. But I'm just wondering, one, how long does that take? From a natural process, does that make sense? And are there certain areas that we need to kind of figure out some action that we can take as a county to incentivize certain areas so that we accelerate the process, I guess is my idea.
Well, the biggest theme that I got out of the summary here was it's about senior housing. That's the highest demand out there. They can't find housing, creating a backlog for in the pipeline of the housing cycle. Also, the highest percentage of poverty. Okay, so that's a concern. So dealing with senior housing however we can seems to be the thing that's going to open up the most areas. As far as actionable items, unfortunately, you're dealing with a market. Okay, so it's almost like saying, well, how do we control the stock market to benefit our people in Sherburne County? It's private industry, so it's difficult. But some of the items that we can address, and I think our friends at the Plan and Zoning are going to be going back to their ordinances as far as accessory buildings and things like that, is what do you guys call them? ADUs. I think that should be I'd throw it out to the board to see if we could go to them with support for that, because there again, if we have so many lots of larger size in Sherburne County, we have 2.5 acre lots is pretty much the standard. Definitely enough to be able to support an accessory building to house the parents or whatever. There's a growing demand for that. So that's one area that's an actionable item that the county can actually take care of to allow these type of buildings. And there again, the housing need is obviously helped out that way, but also the poverty. Some of these people can't move because they can't afford to go to a Danielowski what was it, high-end? What, you just told me, high-end senior living. Not all of us are there.
Amenity driven.
But the kids with money can build a house for them too.
Exactly. So I think that's something that we can do, without incentives or anything like that, but allowing people to be able to take care of their aging parents. And really, things just come full cycle. I mean, historically, that's what happened, that's why there's 3 houses on the farm, right? That's why you took care of your parents. So I think that's a natural evolution that I would like, some talk at EDA, but actually go to the planning commission with a formal recommendation that we support whatever we can do to get these buildings in Sherburne County.
They're opening up
What about,
ADUs as
so
we speak.
along those lines, would there be any opportunity, because the smaller lots are always in the cities. Would there be any, and it's probably a stupid idea, but is there any opportunity to look at specific areas in the county where we could have some sort of development site that allows for smaller lots you know, so that you could build some of these more,
That's what we did call for that in the comp plan. In those areas that we've looked at, Mitch always made some good distinctions about the hamlets in Sherburne County. And those are kind of our small cities, and there's opportunities to keep people in their communities in those areas, you know, so looking at higher density patio homes, it would be helpful, a conversation with one of those, you know, developers. If there's someone that does a lot of that work, what do they need in a community? What land use regulations are beneficial for them to come into a community to make patio homes, to go through that process?
And to spin off that, when we were doing the comp plan and we were going around to the townships, we were talking to the hamlets specifically about doing smaller lots, like patio
That's
homes.
Orac, Palmer, San
Yeah,
Diego.
and basically they're like, well, we don't want anyone coming in to our township. I'm like, but don't you want to stay in your township? And once you did that, they're like, wait a minute. Because I saw too, my parents lived on Briggs for a long time, and too many of those people lived on that lake for 30 years. And when they got older, they had to go live in St. Cloud because they couldn't stay, but they wanted to stay in Palmer, but they couldn't. There was no housing for them. All these, you know, cabins with steep slopes for stairs, they had to pick up their belongings and go to a senior facility in St. Cloud and bye-bye Palmer, where they lived for 30 years.
And we do have some areas that have done something similar to that. Big Lake has a couple of subdivisions that are on about 1 acre lots, I think, right off of County Road 43. The issue that happens eventually is the need for that septic upgrade. And then what ends up happening, they don't have the room to put it, and it becomes a mound system or a pump system that has to be pumped every couple of weeks. So there's some of those things to have some consideration to, but it is not impossible.
yeah, I don't pretend that it's an easy solution. I just think it's something we should at least think about.
I think
you guys already have.
we have the groundwork kind of laid for that. I mean, the policies are kind of there to support this kind of.
Cannabis is kind of taking
Yeah.
them away.
It took our steam
Yeah.
away.
And just a huge resource drain.
Yeah, and so that's wrapped, that's almost done, and Mitch and I just had this conversation, let's get after it. But I really do think if there are, you know, if anyone knows someone in the industry, that does kind of the, you know, patio home design, we're not familiar with them. They aren't coming to our office, they're not talking to us, cause they think of us as very ex-urb development, you know, 2.5 acre site. We just don't have people kind of exploring, that's the market concept, but is there anyone out there that's doing this stuff to help us understand what they need for land use regulations to come into the county and do this type of stuff? Because clearly there's a need, I think is what the housing study tells us.
Get back to what Ken was saying with the ADUs, that is one thing that we were going full steam ahead on after the comp plan, but again with cannabis. Because we do see that. We get calls regularly from people that want to be able to put a second dwelling on their property for their kids or their parents, and we get them, especially during COVID. So, and like Ken was saying, these are larger parcels. They can more than accommodate a second dwelling, not another 3,000 square foot house, but just another one, either on its own or an accessory building with a living space above, or take an existing accessory building and convert it. I mean, obviously, we're gonna get into building code, but that's where we gotta get, and we're not the first ones doing it. I mean, Isani County has ADUs, so it's like, they're out there. I mean, you can go to St. Louis Park and there's a little cottage behind someone's little city lot. I mean, why, you know, if they can do it there, Lake Minnetonka, why can't we do it here? So,
And it isn't just the, you know, moving the parents back or anything like that. With the workforce changes that were also talked about in the study, with more people working from home, hybrid, things like that, well, obviously that needs space. So we get calls quite a bit to, you're either converting the guest room in the house to the office now, and now you don't have a place for guests, and they look for that. Or a lot of people are looking to move an office off-site, so at least they can close the door at the end of the day and not have the office going all the time. So there's different matrices here that are really driving the ADUs. And from an economic development side, I think, I don't see any negatives by, you know, recommending to allow these.
I think we have to be realistic too in the fact that it isn't just, there's gonna be rental opportunities as well. And because I'll be quite frank, we have a 2.5 parcel that we have been trying to figure out how we can build our downsize home on. Because there's already a primary. And you have all the rules of where your driveway can go. It can't go out onto a county road unless it's what, 250 feet?
330.
Three something. But yet that would be a perfect opportunity. And all you have to do is make sure your septic can handle that extra load, so.
And the other thing I think to keep in mind is, we talk about this because, there is an obvious uptick in demand, but realistically, the percentage of people that are gonna build another structure on their property is very, very small. I mean, just with the cost of building, you have to, have the finances, you have to have the right space yet. So there's a lot of things that have to come into it where I don't think you're gonna see everybody out there, cause these projects cost $150,000, minimum. And I mean, we did one in Becker that was last year, that was $475,000 for an accessory building. So it does require some finances.
Probably has some amenities.
Yeah.
That was your answer?
Yeah.
I'm not a snob, honest.
Well, but I think to your point though, it's not gonna be one solution
Right.
to try to address this. It's going to be a portfolio of solutions. Cause there's gonna be different options that different people are
You can
interested
move
in
up
and
to the
can
big
afford.
kid table.
But I've always believed that this is something that, it is the government's, actionable item is to allow regulation, to allow the private market to do its job. And there again, just quickly, obviously, we all know the problem with incentives is it doesn't allow the market to correct and keeps the prices high longer. So we just keep pushing it down the road instead of letting the market just do what the market does. So-
Well, when I say incentives, I don't necessarily mean cash incentives. I mean ease of regulation. I mean,
There we go.
different lot size. I mean, making it easier to do business, ensuring.
But that's,
Infrastructure improvement.
right, but I have to quantify, that's my personal belief, okay? And being in that market, however, there may be a good economic development reason to offer incentives, cash or otherwise, which case I wear the EDA
Develops
hat
the tax
and we
base.
look at it that way.
Or you're gonna have parcels that are for sale, but have some challenges in regards to the amount of wetlands on them. And the owner wants like $2 million for the parcel. It's a beautiful piece, but it has a lot of issues with trying to pencil something with all the wetlands they have to deal with. So those are opportunities that can be looked at.
I know Annie's gotta leave. Do you wanna add anything before you take off?
No, to your point too, the other aspect with these dwelling units is how do you, if they don't have the cash, how do they finance them? Because, when you're trying to get these on the secondary market, where do you find another house that has a second home on it? We saw that a lot back in the day with homes that had 2 kitchens. Something like that, so I think you're right, it's not gonna be the answer, because there's gonna be more challenges and it's gonna be a very small number, but.
Looking at selling the primary and using cash.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, to give some perspective on the city side too, we're going through, and to jump on Andy's, we're going through our zoning code, we have been for the last 2 years, which will wrap up at the end of this year, to revise to make it more development friendly, a little more simpler, adjusting lot sizes. One of the things we are kind of mulling over is the ADU piece, but there's, rentals is a massive issue with that, what happens after the people are gone. That's kind of the biggest challenge with ADUs, is how do you regulate that? And so those, not that we're against them, because I think it's how do we solve it in the city? You have smaller lots typically, how do you adjust those? The other thing is the septics are a limiting factor in the townships. You can only go so small before you can't put a developable lot anymore with the septic regulations. So that's where you have the city lots that come in that are the smaller that you can put greater demand on. So there's just something to think about, because, you talk about the 1 acre lots, but when you get to that size, you have a septic system, you don't have public infrastructure in there that allows you to put more density on a lot at a certain point. So how do you balance that between the township and the city?
And then as the city grows, how do they absorb into something like that? Because the cost to do that for them is huge. and you've already got something, so there's that consideration that is always trying to balance that.
The nice thing about the 1 acre lots is we've done a few up by Briggs, and it's demonstrated it's, it's enough area for primary, secondary. And then even when on 2.5 acre lots, you only need 40,000 square feet, so less than an acre of high and dry to have that as a developable lot. So it's been demonstrated that you can do that, and like you were saying before, about partnering with developers, I was on the other end. You develop, you don't feel the love from the government.
And you should feel the love.
Because you don't realize how much you depend on those developers. Like I said, they're the ones putting their money in, they're the ones losing sleep at night, they're the ones, doing all that, where as the government, we're depending on them to put those out there for these resources, so.
And that thought process has to change. You've got to be a partner with, because it's also a market value, taxable value, what you're helping to grow.
Yep.
Without it, it's not going to happen for a good long time.
It's a little better now.
I'm just curious, I've never had to deal with septics. How long does the primary septic typically last? And then,
20 years or so.
In Sherburne County,
Yeah, with
pretty
the
much
sand.
forever.
Yeah.
I
Or
have,
not
I have
forever,
some
but
systems
forever,
on some of my properties that are over 40 years old.
really,
If you maintain them right.
And there has been advancements in, the quality of our process for evaluating septics has increased over the years. Some septics went too deep in the ground, in the 90s when we saw those big housing booms. There was just, practices have gotten better with septic systems. They really are, new systems that are well designed, well, installed and verified, really do have a pretty good life.
But these,
I'm sorry.
well, just quickly, but the people have to be educated on them, because people that
There's
move
a
from
big
the
maintenance
city
Come out of the city and.
They don't
to there, they don't know that they
I've
have to
never
get
used
them
one.
pumped every 3 years, they don't,
And that's part of our education. So we're working on the maintenance thing too. So hopefully they could get 20, plus years out of a septic system. And they can even go back in that same area with with a different type of design.
Plus,
So
I think we have some areas where if you can do a shared septic, at the moment, I don't recommend that, because there's not the ability to tie those homes to the maintenance and their participation in paying, and then all of a sudden the thing has an issue and there's no money to solve it.
right.
And so, but there's no ability for the county to put anything on their property tax statement. So
But-
it's a,
That's a whole different
But
deal from
it can be
an
an-
ADU.
well, no, what I'm saying is if we can define that and get some ability, those are answers as well, because a shared septic, like what is out there at the shore.
Shores of Eagle.
Yes.
See, there's different shared though, like, a lot of ones that fail have only grinder pumps in there, so they're going like to a city sewer and water basically, or a city sewer. I believe that if you're gonna have a shared septic, that property owner's tank, they should have a tank on their property, so they have, that's their responsibility.
Yeah.
A shared drain field's a different story, but when these people just flush it, grinds and goes away, that's what destroys these community septics, so.
And like I said, I think there's an opportunity, because we haven't had one that's in the past that we have not had to touch and help with.
Correct, yeah.
But there's an opportunity going forward. I don't think we should just dismiss them.
If I could just close this out, so we do have kind of a toolkit of ideas that we're looking to go forward. The real benefit of kind of planning and zoning kind of get in the mix with EDA is connecting us with some of the industries and the demands. This housing study, when you did in 2020, it was a great insight for me. All of a sudden, boom, I started seeing the bigger picture of the county, and not just, this study takes it even further. We start seeing kind of the cities, we start understanding what's going on in different regions. So this will be a big benefit to us. This is another tool we're using, but it's that connection between planning and zoning. What is the need out there, and how do we modify our regulations? Because I've just been regulating people for 20 plus years. I just regulate. But if I can be told, but if I can be informed about the obstacles and hear from those partners that we have to build, that's what EDA ends up, that's what's been a big benefit for us.
20 years now, you're gonna listen to what I'm saying?
No. I do. Just thinking about, the extra properties that are gonna go on these existing places, how is that gonna work with covenants and those particular developments, I mean, that's gonna be
That's
a
a
big,
private thing that they'd have to work out with their covenants.
right,
And
which-
a lot,
An acknowledgement to it, kind of similar, like a home business has, could be affected by covenants. Accessory buildings could be affected by covenants. We have like a disclaimer that's, they
Right.
verify and look at that stuff.
But with covenants, does it clearly state one single family?
I think like
Some
ours,
do.
some of ours do,
That's what I'm
it's
wondering.
a single family residence with.
I mean, is that
so
one
many
where they
square
can go and revise them and re-record them, or?
Well, it depends on
And how strong
who
the,
the person is that's, so like ours are mainly, we can do whatever we want, whenever, so.
well, and another thing is, because of, a lot of our developments did go in during the eighties and nineties, a lot of those covenants are starting to drop off. Usually they have about a 20-year sunset on them. And so that's opening a majority of our developments.
or it relies on, like my daughter lives in Backwoods, and that was a covenant-driven development. And all of a sudden, your neighbor, who you're good friends with, great neighborhood relationships, puts up a pole barn structure that is way outside of what the covenants say, and doesn't match what are you gonna do?
Yeah, civil.
Well,
Nothing.
and that's the thing,
How strong
that's
are
the
they
other
now?
way that I see too, is there's enough people that violated them where they
Yeah.
just throw up their hands. But,
And the platted lots are gonna be the tricky ones for us when we do the ADUs, cause it's gonna be the larger meets and bounds properties that are gonna be the easier ones. It's when you're in platted lots, you wanna keep that integrity of the development. How are we gonna do that?
So on the 1 acre lots, most of the townships, they haven't been real warm and fuzzy about that, right? So the other thought would maybe be if we did like 20% 1 acre lots and 80% 2.5 acre lots, where you could still get 20% of them would be patio homes. And you'd still have somebody
See that
that
in
would,
cities.
a family that would buy their place and, hey, mom and dad, you can come live down here.
No, I mean, I think it would
Maybe
be
they
nice
would
to
warm
be,
up to
That is
you know,
interesting.
that'd be
That
a
is an
way to-
interesting concept. I mean, because that's what you see with many of the city developments they have.
townhomes, single family.
Staged.
All,
You were a town board member, how do you think that would've?
I think that probably would have worked. I don't think,
That's a good.
a lot of the townships, we don't want a huge amount of people out there. And I don't think our roads can handle it either myself, but like if we were doing something like that, like some type of
Phased,
percentage of. Cause there's some lots where we can't get that, or we could get that extra lot in there, and that would be a perfect spot for something like that.
I'd love to get creative out there as opposed to just putting 2.5 and 2.5 and 2.5. We can get a little more, creative out there with what you just mentioned would be. That's a good idea.
You're probably gonna have to, because the value of land is.
I don't know how we still have land. From the early 2000s, it was just killed.
How would that impact developers' profit, doing that, would that?
Oh, it would be helpful, cause I don't think, if we're gonna get a patio home where somebody's retired, I think they'll still pay pretty close to that 2.5 acre lot, depending on what the land's like, So I think our profits will probably be better.
well, and it's, obviously, the more rooftops you can get on a piece of property, you make your money on the last 2 lots, right? You're sweating.
Well, because right now, the 1 acre you can get under shoreline residential. So if you're within general recreational lake, within 1,000 feet, you can get the 1 acre lots. So I mean, it's,
Well, from an EDA perspective, not worrying about septic designs or any of that, because that is pretty well mandated, and the engineering that has to go into a septic these days is very impressive, actually. But from an economic development, the lower, reduced lot size and allowance of ADUs, I think, is very beneficial. And that's all the further we have to go is, yes, we want you have to figure out how to get it to work, but, I mean, in general, that is what promotes economic development. That's what's gonna help developers come in if they can develop lower dense or higher density lots. That's huge, because like I said, the last 5 lots are where we're gonna collect, so if we can get 2 more, and then the flexibility to whatever we can do to ease up senior housing and facilitate home businesses, that's the other side, that if somebody has to move out of location because they can't put that secondary office out back or whatever, But we don't wanna lose those people, so, that would be my recommendation to this board, that we recommend to planning and zoning. A lot of other things go into it, but that's not our job.
And I think too, some of these things, like on this slide, that we haven't really gotten to.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up with the housing trust discussion, but this is, I don't wanna cut you off, so.
No, I'm good, I'm good.
The only thing I was thinking with what you were saying, Ken, is there might be some tertiary zoning things that go along with that. You know, I don't know the rules around, you know, the driveways going on the county roads or whatever, but, I mean, there might be some tertiary things that would be included in zoning that would also aid in being able to do exactly what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
So we would include that as well.
Yep.
As far as the housing trust, we've talked about that a number of times in this meeting. We're gonna create an ordinance for the county board to approve, or the HRA to approve, that'll be very vague. It'll allow us to do a lot of different things. It'll be up to this group to recommend reining that in. As staff, we need programs. We never wanna promise a developer something, and then it'll come to a group like this, and they say, hey, that's not what we were thinking. So staff needs some direction on what the board and the groups will approve, so that there's some certainty for these developers when they build a home. So these are some of the things that can be used. I know we're running short on time. This is where I want to have a larger, more robust discussion on what do we want that program to look like. Like I said, the board's going to create something that's very vague, will allow us to do a lot of things. How do we rein that in? So we don't have enough time to really dive into this today, but
Well, I think some of that, full disclosure, I didn't get all the way through the 250 pages.
you're at 2:30?
It is towards the back for tools.
Yeah, so I was, about halfway through, but, to have time to actually go through this, cause a lot of that, I think a lot of, the idea power is going to be in here as far as that goes, on how to allocate things, and then I think we're gonna need, at least me, a refresher summary of just what the program, the financing and all that, since it's been a few months since we've gone through that. And then if we put that on as an agenda item, and just have a full meeting on that, I think it'll, I know the discussions we've had in the past have been very, robust, so I'd wanna allow enough time to go through.
Our plan would be to have Matt from Maxfield, who did the study, come, and you could ask some of those more in-depth questions of where the data came from, how can we break that up more, and then that could lead into this discussion of, hey, here's the gaps, how do we help fill those?
Yeah.
So I'm hoping for November. If he can't make it, we'll try for December, but it's definitely where the direction we wanna push this. Do you wanna wrap it up at all?
Just in a build-up for that, we've been reaching out to a whole bunch of different counties in Minnesota and seeing how they're using their housing trust funds. And it's interesting because most counties, this is a good example, like Crow Wing County has on their website, like, oh, we're gonna help in all these different categories, but when I actually talked with the staff, the only program they have going is a reimbursable grant for new construction. So after the new construction is built, then they can get reimbursed for a certain amount of the costs of that build. So,
But that's helpful.
it is, yeah, extremely helpful, and that might be where we wanna start, is something like that. But, if you do some research on housing trust funds and you go on different county websites, it's a good rule of thumb to know that generally, all the programs that they're kind of listing on this site aren't built out yet. Most counties are figuring this out just like we are.
And even if you do, like, I know sometimes there's a tool, I think it's a 429. Yeah, well, it basically, because a lot of developers, that's a lot of upfront money that you have to come up with while you're developing your product and relying on sales. So if there's something that can assist with that where it staves off that front end cost, you still have to pay it, but it's based on sale. And then it gets paid back. So, I mean, there's tools that I think that we can open
That's
up.
what we need to discuss.
Yeah.
Which tools do we wanna provide?
Brian, did you have more on an update, or?
Yeah, absolutely, and, I'll respect everyone's time here.
We've got time.
Okay, excellent.
They were here till 9:30.
You said 9:30? Yeah, excellent. We can bring up the, overall, the ED coordinator one, yeah. And I mentioned the time because when we get to the childcare slide, I have something to bring up there. But we'll kind of go through each one. And after I kind of present out some of what we've been doing the last month, I'll ask you guys if this is a format that works for you, if you want to do something different. I've seen in the past, we've done handouts, so we can talk about what you'd like to see in the future. But if we go to the, I have it. So looking at the business retention expansion, I've started with the easy ones first and kind of going into more the heavy hitters like the manufacturing. I'd like to do more BRNE visits with manufacturing in the coming months. But started with Creative Kids Academy. So I met with Brandy Sorga-Koons. She's the executive director over the Creative Kids Academy. They have 13 locations. And did a BRNE visit with her so that I can kind of get my feet wet with what a BRNE visit looks like, kind of how that flow happens, and added that to our Executive Pulse software for the BRNE visits and shared that out with Elk River. And the goal would then to be continue to build up the BRNE visits. I really do want to get into more the manufacturing side and just some other industries, but also looking at different businesses that are in the townships, because I think they would be easy ones to kind of start with too. So I have reached out to the townships and kind of doing that for BRNE, but really ramping up those visits. Continuing to work with the ILT Academy for their different cohorts. They're going through their fall cohort. I'm actually going through as a participant just to kind of see, actually it's their winter cohort, just to kind of see what that process is like. So that's every Thursday night that I'm going with them. On the workforce side, it's been a lot of great introductions and continuing to understand where the school districts are with building up that workforce through the high schools, even the junior highs, to then go into the technical colleges, the 2-year degrees. We were able to go down with MAPSED down to Hutchinson High School and tour their Tiger Path kind of design. So through their high school, everyone is kind of geared toward a career path, and it's a really exciting transition to see happening. And part of that presentation in Hutchinson was Miles, forget his last name, is the economic development director for Hutchinson, and he presented that right now in all the jobs in Minnesota, 70% require just a 2-year degree or less. So it's only 30% that need that 4-year degree. So that's a big thing that we're trying to focus on the workforce side. Was able to tour Meadowcraft as well as Glen Meadowcraft up in Princeton. But Meadowcraft was really interesting because I got to meet with one of the floor supervisors. He appreciated my questions, so we kind of had a 3-hour tour when it should have been a little bit shorter. But it was really nice to be able to get his perspective as a floor manager, and he's really excited to see the changes that are happening for precision manufacturing. And he really wants to put out there that manufacturing is not dirty, it's not dingy, it's skilled and it's advanced. And it was really motivating to have that tour with him. On the housing side, obviously getting the housing study and starting to dig through that. Was able to go to the Breakfast for Humanity event. So it was the Central Minnesota Habitat for Humanity put on an event last week. And yesterday, actually, myself and Commissioner Phoebe were able to meet with Chad Booley. He's the Central Minnesota's Habitat for Humanity's executive director. He's relatively new, at about 1.5 years. The previous executive director was also Chad, so it's kind of confusing. But Chad is really wanting to get more into Sherburne County and do more partnerships with our local high schools to do more building projects in Sherburne County. So we're trying to help open those doors. We've connected him with Amy Lord at ISD 728, principal over at Big Lake High School, and trying to put those introductions a little bit more.
If there's anything I can do to help that connection, let me know.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Childcare is continuing to be a big area that I'm diving into, trying to come up with different ideas. So one of the things, and looking at the time today too, we've been trying to brainstorm and spitball and come up with different ideas for Minnesota DEED has a child care economic development program, and they opened up a request for proposal at the end of September with a closing date at the end of October to try to come up with ideas to increase specifically infant through toddler spots in Sherburne County, or in wherever. And the grant is up to $300,000 per site if you can come up with ideas that would actually help increase capacity and also increase actually filling those capacity spots. And so after I'm done with this presentation, I have a very brief presentation for you of a proposal that we're trying to get off the ground for that. So I'm kind of rolling that into our updates here, because I'd really like to throw a proposal toward that, because if we don't throw anything toward it, we're gonna miss out on it.
I might want to transition to that right now.
Yep, excellent. That works out. We can go and transition to the other slide. And I do want to say, we've been trying to work on there's been about 5 different ideas we've been trying to work on the last few weeks. This idea finally kind of came together in its entirety about a day or 2 ago. So it is not perfect. I really am open to any thoughts on it. If it gets shut down completely, that's fine. But really, we wanted to look at, so let me show you what the grant RFP is. So it's through deed to increase the number of quality childcare providers to support economic development. And what that can look like is anything from training to incentives to retain employees to basically they've opened this up to get all different ideas. And it's tied to different actual physical locations. So you have to tie it to 2 different locations in your county, like childcare centers or family centers or family childcare. And it's $300,000 per site. And again, that proposal is due at the end of October, so it's a very small window, it felt like. And again, we have a lot of other ideas that we'll get ready for future ones. They just couldn't come together.
So is it only 2 sites, or can that 300,000 or 600,000 be broken into 20 different sites at lesser amounts with a total capital?
That's a really, and ours kind of does a blending of the two. It is written as 2 sites, so for the purpose of the grant, we need to show that those 2 sites increase capacity. If it happens to benefit a whole bunch of other centers, I think that's also an advantage. But we do have to tie it back to those 2 sites and prove that at least those 2 sites benefited. So our thought, this is so touchy. Our thought is that in meeting with Brandy Sorga-Coons, the executive director of Creative Kids Academy, and in meeting with a lot of these other childcare groups, the childcare centers, so the actual centers that we have in Sherburne County, we have a little bit more than, well, we have like 10 to 13, depending on how you define centers in the county. There's been a need and a want for those directors to be able to come together and work as a collective group to kind of come up with solutions for the centers. And it's been hard to pull that group together, partly out of funding and partly because it's kind of a new concept. But what we would like to do is partner with the Sherburne County United Way. Kat Scharf is the executive director there. She was really interested in trying to get more involved with pulling together a group. And so using the grant money to actually pull together a directors group of our childcare center directors and upper leadership in Sherburne County and have them actually work through an established like innovation thinking pipeline. So that would be a partnership also with like ILT to do a presentation to them about innovative thinking and have them kind of brainstorm and come up with ideas for how to increase the capacity and get those spots filled in their centers, because trying to rely on the people that are actually working and can actually come up with the solutions.
How many childcare centers did you say we have in Sherburne County?
Depending on how you define it, we have 11 to 13. 11, I think, is the appropriate number.
And we are looking at childcare centers as meaning the larger, more operated, do I want to say business style or?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the centers are the ones that are licensed through the state as centers. So no one is living in that home. They are usually in, they're usually in commercial districts, which is opposed to our family child care licensees, which we have about 154 of those. And on that side, the family side, we're digging into those too, and I've called a lot of them and done some research with them, but they have different needs than what the centers have. And for the purpose of this grant, we're looking at capacity building and filling that capacity. And I think that the centers are most ready for that. The family childcare gets very limited on how many kids they can have in their home, and most are actually at capacity. You really can't do much with building their capacity. So that's why we'd want to focus on the centers. But
And are you targeting the infant to what age?
yes, infant through toddler, which I can look at what toddler means, but so for this grant, in order for us not to have a matching contribution, we have to meet one of 6 waiver requirements, and one of the requirements is to focus on infant and toddler. And through research with First Children's Finance and Milestones, it's that infant through toddler that that's our biggest need in the county anyway, because usually it's the most expensive one where people actually lose money.
And it's the most restricted on numbers that you can have per person that is.
Yes, and it's the most restrictive, yep. You can only have, at a center, I believe you can only have 4 infants per one staff member, for one teacher. So really, our capacity building in these 2 locations, if the directors group could come up with some innovative ideas that we can help them to try and test and implement, if we were able to double their capacity, which would just mean bringing on 1 more teacher, that would increase the slots by 11 slots in each of these 2 centers, which would be a total of 22 new childcare slots. And to your point, since it's a directors group, actually building that out throughout the county. So if all of our centers could benefit, then we're looking at over 100 new childcare slots. And so we'd write the grant to really focus on the 2, but also very much make it clear that if they can come up with some innovative solutions, because they're the ones that are boots on the ground, they have the best ideas right now, they can come up with some solutions, we can get closer to 100 new slots instead of just Band-Aid here, Band-Aid there.
So is there an action item you need from us on this?
We're looking for approval to seek this. What's the actual grant amount we're requesting?
Grant amount could be up to $600,000. We'd like to request that full amount, and we'll kind of work backwards to see how it goes.
Formal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, entertain that.
Make a motion that we move forward with putting together a application for that $600,000 grant opportunity.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you. Yes. Okay. Yeah, good. All right.
When will they announce the?
Time's a
work?
ticking now, get it up.
Yeah, and it's great because they're moving quickly too. So we have to submit our application by October 31st. They say that they're going to be selecting the winners in November, and then the funds will be distributed this December. And then you have from this December through next December to use those funds and constantly report back to how you've been using them.
What's the total pot available?
Ooh, it's a few million. They do say, I have to take a look at that.
Okay.
They do say it's going to be highly competitive, but I'm hoping that that means that there'll be less applicants because they're scared that it's highly competitive. But if we don't throw something toward it, we don't get a chance.
And that is one of the larger barriers to getting back into the workforce after having a child, is finding that care, because like you said, they're very limited, and it can be fairly expensive.
Yeah.
And so.
And just briefly, I've been told by about 4 or 5 different, both on the family childcare side and the center side, that they get calls from parents, and the parents in Sherburne County are asking, we're thinking about having a second kid.
Can I get on the waiting list?
Yeah, we want to get on the waiting list before we even start trying. And that's kind of how bad it is right now, especially for infant and toddlers. So that's why this grant is out there, because the state is recognizing it's such a need. So, thank you.
Anything else of utmost importance?
I believe so. Just continuing to move along with, no, I think those were all the key points. Yeah.
Can I add one quick thing, separate of Brian? Molly Hanson is an EDA member. She's been struggling to come to these meetings since she switched jobs. Her term is up at the end of the year. She's recommending the person that filled her position to replace her. So we'll be going to the board in November to appoint her in January. She comes highly recommended, and she deals with childcare, which we try to have different industries on the board, and I think it'd be a great fit.
Were you gonna say something?
I'm just gonna say, no, because we're out of time. I'll wait till next time.
Put a pin in it.
All right, well then I'd,
Got a minute.
motion to adjourn.
That one's, that's fast.
That is fast, yeah.
9:29, you had a minute.
We do, go ahead.
Well, the other thing I was gonna say was, after you get through this piece, I think the next piece to look at, so one piece to look at the number of slots. The second thing I think we need to understand is what are the cost drivers? Because it is so hugely expensive for childcare. I think we're missing half the picture if we don't understand what's driving the costs.
I couldn't agree with you more, and that's a big area that I'm trying to dive into too. It's a business, and the business model is broken. So we need to figure out where it's broken and how to fix that. I totally agree with you there.
And what we found too through some of the seminar that we attended in Hutchinson was that the barrier can also be for new people wanting to come in is affording that house or that place where they would operate that business because the cost of housing is up there. So that's a barrier.
Anybody wanna make a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks everybody, great meeting.